Good day, everyone. Welcome back to our second lecture class for the course PAD270 Malaysian Politics for this week. I hope that all of you have gained enough understanding on the political background in Malaysia during our last week class. Again, if you have problem and need to clarify on something regarding on our previous lesson, do not hesitate to contact me for further clarification and consultation. Alright, as usual, before we proceed to our lesson, I am going to expose the syllabus content of this week's chapter first. Chapter 2 consists of quite a number of theories that fall under two main approaches that we are going to discuss shortly. So class, in chapter 2, entitled Concept or Theory in Understanding Malaysian Politics, you will need to get familiar with two approaches, which are the ethnic approach and the class approach. So here we go, the syllabus content for part 1. So under 2.1 is ethnic approach. We are going to learn about three related concepts under ethnic approach. The first one is plural society, followed by primordial, and then the next one, consociationalism. This one is quite hard to pronounce, consociationalism. And then next one, class approach. Under class approach content is class struggle, patronage or patron-client, and then next one, neo-feudal. As an introduction, in Malaysian politics, there are various approaches or theories used to explain the political nature of this country. However, the two most commonly used approaches are, the first one, ethnic approach, in which we will discuss about this shortly, and then the next one, class approach. Right? We're going to discuss about ethnic approach. So, ethnic approach. There are three main concepts in understanding the ethnic approach, which are plural society, primordial, and also consociationalism. In other words, ethnic approach in Malaysia can be understood through these three terms. Here we go, I already summarized for you. Please memorize these three related terms for ethnic approach. Yeah, this is very important. So, class, I bet you all know or can think rationally that the ethnic approach sounds accurately compatible with our country's groups of societies condition, in which Malaysia is a country of multiracial community that consists of various ethnics and sub-ethnics itself, whether in Peninsula, Sabah, or Sarawak. Hence, in understanding what ethnic approach is all about, highlight is given to the multiple ethnics itself that come together to form a plural society. Okay, let's take a look at the definition of plural society by Dr. J.S. Farnivel. Okay, plural society is defined as a society comprising two or more elements or social orders which live side by side within the same political unit, yet without mingling. They have different ethnic groups, different languages or religions. The plural society considers as one lacking consensus, or in Farnivel terms, one without common social demand. So actually, this explains that they don't really have same interest. In example, building Chinese temple constitutes a public bed for Malay Muslim mosques, provide few or no benefits for the Chinese. Generally, plural society means the rules and rule were of different races and live apart from one another in separate communities. Okay, next we are going to look at the characteristics of plural society. So please remember that there are 9 main characteristics of plural society. So what do you understand about characteristic? Characteristic is actually a feature or quality belonging typically to a person, place, or thing and serving to identify them. The first characteristic of plural society is the separate communities inclined toward conflictual behavior. The second one, force rather than consensus maintains order, products of colonial politic and economic interest. They mix but do not combine. They always have their different interests. Yeah? Then number 4, they are deeply divided and highly separated in almost every aspect. In such, politics, economy, social, and also education. That's why if you see our country now, we have sekolah jenis kebangsaan, right? So this is one of the implication of plural society. Number 5, each ethnic groups exhibit distinct cultural habits, speak different languages, and where possible limit social context to their own kind. Next one, each community possesses a distinct set of values incompatible with those of other cultural groups. So we move on to the next one. Number 7, they are tied up by primordial sentiment. So what is this primordial sentiment? You will learn about this later on. Number 8, each member of society is molded by the cultural institutions of the original social order that he or she originates from. Next one, last but not least, number 9, the different communities of the plural society can meet only in the marketplace. We move on to the next one, which is primordial sentiment. This is what I have been mentioning just now. Okay, what is exactly primordial sentiments? It is actually another important concept used to evaluate and to see the political condition in Malaysia. Primordial sentiments concept is one of the popular concepts used in trying to explain racial or racial politics in Malaysia. According to Clifford Geertz, 1963, there are 4 main sentiments that influence the primordial pattern in politics. As you can see here, the first sentiment is related to the race criteria. Race refers to selected phenotypical features that one has, such as skin color, facial form, hair type, so on and forth. So if you can see here, for race criteria, it is more to physical, yeah? The second one is related to language matter. Speakers of different languages often claim that language represents or constitutes the basis of a distinct culture. Next one, which is the third criteria, is religion. Religion is crucial in politics, as different religion may sharpen primordialism. But similar religion too actually does not dampen the destabilizing effects that other salient cleavage create. In example, Northern Ireland, the Irish and Catholic and British Protestant, and Pakistan, which involve Punjabi Muslim and also Bengali Muslims. Last but not least, tribe and custom. These two may be racially alike, but are often differentiated on the basis of tribe and custom, a differentiation that has political implications. African in Congo and Ivory Coast in Nigeria are 2 good examples that tribe and custom can be a separate things to raise an issue. Alright, let's move on to the next one, which is still under primordial sentiments. Yeah? Primordial also explains ethnicity as a fixed characteristics of individuals and communities. Ethnicity is embedded in inherited biological attributes, a long history of practicing cultural differences, or both. Ethnic identity is seen as unique in intensity and durability and as an existential factor defining individual self-identification and communal distinctiveness. Mobilization of ethnic identity and ethnic nationalism is a powerful tool to engage the group in a political struggle. Alright, so we're going to see what is the main argument. So how is the primordial sentiments, which consists of 4 criteria said earlier, can create issues in our country's politics? The main argument about it is that the political rivalry in Malaysia is largely dependent on these sentiments. Race, religion, language, and tradition play a role in designing Malaysia's political pattern. Why? The first one, the subordination of primordial sentiments to the requirements of civil politics. And then second one, the obsession to the sentiment, each race is directed toward the interest of its own people or group. And the third one, the loyalties to subnational cultural groups often undermine the stability, if not very existence of the state. Alright, let's move on to the next term. So class, we move on to the next term, which is Consociationalism. This was the term that I said it's quite hard to pronounce just now. Alright, what is Consociationalism? Consociationalism is also known as ethnic accommodation or consociational democracy. So if you happen to have a problem in pronouncing consociationalism, you can always say ethnic accommodation. It was popularized by Aaron Lichfart in 1969 in favor of the consociational approach to ethnic conflict regulation. He added that consociationalism requires conscious cooperation among elites of different communities to control the destabilizing effects of open ethnic competition. So next, what are the favorable conditions for consociationalism? There are 8 favorable conditions for consociationalism, yeah guys, so remember 8. The first one is segmental isolation of ethnic communities. Second one, a multiple balance of power. The third one, the presence of external threats common to all communities. The fourth one, overarching loyalties to the state. The fifth one, a tradition of elite accommodation. The sixth one, socio-economic equality. Next, a small population size, reducing the policy load. And the last one, a moderate multi-party system with segmental parties. Remember, yeah, this one, very important. And then what are the key characteristics of consociational democracy? So we have 4 here. According to Lichfart, there are 4 main characters that should present in order to be referred as a consociational democracy. The first one is grand coalition of elites, as you can see from the slide. This point explains that the elite of each ethnic has the tendency or will come together to rule in the interest of society because they recognize the dangers of non-cooperation. This character is accurately showed the political condition in Malaysia during the 2018 general election, if you still remember, in which an opposition bloc coalition named Pakatan Harapan was established to defeat Barisan Nasional. Pakatan Harapan is led by Tun Mahathir and some other multiracial leaders. Next one, mutual veto. This character refers to the consensus among groups. Mutuality means that the minority is unlikely to successfully block the majority. If one group blocks another on some matter, the latter are likely to block the former in return. In a simple explanation, this type of democracy is a way of a minority veto for the protection of vital minority interests. The third characteristic involves proportional representation. Sorry. Based on population, if one pillar accounts for 30% of the overall society, then they occupy 30% of the positions on the police force, in civil service, and in other national and civic segments of society. And then the fourth characteristic is the segmental autonomy. This character creates a sense of individuality and allows for different culturally based community laws. This explains that the federal arrangements must allow for autonomy in certain policy fields. For example, immigration policy, for which responsibility lays under the state control or di bawah kawalan kerajaan negeri. It can be concluded that the consociational democracy aims at establishing a stable democratic system in deeply divided society that is based on power sharing between elites from different social ethnic groups. In the context of Malaya, it fits the term consociational state, as Malaya has major internal divisions along ethnic, religious or linguistic lines, with none of the divisions large enough to form a majority group, yet nonetheless managed to remain stable due to consultation among the elites of each of its major social groups. Next one, we are going to look at class struggle. It's another approach. In analyzing Malaysian politics, class approach emerged as an antithesis to the ethnic approach, meaning to say, scholars that stated the suitability of class approach for Malaysian politics condition have the tendency to reject ethnic approach in which we have learned about previously in the context of Malaysian politics. Class approach argues that the economic imbalances in the country creates contradictory economic classes. What will scholars have been saying about the class approach? Let's see. Alright, class approach, according to Sham, 1975, Brennan, 1982, Jomo, 1986, and Jesudason, 1995, they view class approach as critical rather than ethnic approach, which is more normative. So why they view the class approach as critical? It sees something more implicit than merely the manifestation of a party leader's cooperation or negotiation representing each of their ethnic groups. Class approach, seeing cooperation or negotiation between elites, was a mere camouflage, fake or insincere, and the party leaders only acted in representing the interest of their own people. So 3 theories to understand class approach are, the first one, class struggle, Patron-client, and the next one, Neo-feudal. I have summarized it for you, so please remember these 3 concepts or theories in understanding class approach.
So far, I have not yet spoken about that one word with which Marx became an inescapable presence in the science of sociology. No, I do not mean the word capitalism or the word alienation, not even the word revolution. For us sociologists, Marx is the man who gave us the word class. He must have picked it up again in left-wing intellectual circles in Paris when he was living there in the 40s of the 19th century with his wife Jenny. One of the big themes in sociology is social inequality, especially social stratification, the formation of a social ladder, a classification from low to high. is interesting to observe that everywhere in the world people associate poverty, bad education, lack of power, poor living conditions with standing low on an imaginary ladder, and high salary, excellent education, a life of luxury with being on the highest rungs of that ladder. Maybe that high-low metaphor is universally convincing because everybody experiences in their childhood that adults who are taller than children have more money to spend. They know more. They are more powerful. Anyway, in theories of social stratification, we use terms like caste or estate or social layer, but Marx introduced a term that has become a household word in the social sciences and also in the political arena and in everyday life language: class. Most people are not reminded of Karl Marx anymore when, for example, they read in the newspapers that a new class of very poor people seems to be growing in the urban ghettos of the modern metropolitan cities. But it is interesting that the problem is framed in a Marxian terminology, using that word class. In his more journalistic articles, Marx sometimes discerned many different classes, but in his theoretical texts, he reduced all those different classes to two basic classes. And those two classes are not only the two most important classes, they are also the two classes that remain intact when capitalism reaches its final phase. The middle class will disappear. Some of the members of the middle class will be able to move into the dominant class. Most people in the middle classes will tumble down into the class of the oppressed and the dominated. Two classes. On the one hand, there is a class of people who do not own the means of production, the factories, the machinery in the factories, so they are forced to sell the only thing that they own, and that is their ability to work, their labor power. On the other hand, we see a class of people who do own the means of production, who are the captains of industry, controlling the new enormous industrial plants that have come to dominate the outskirts of the modern cities. Those entrepreneurs do not have to sell their labor power. They can hire the labor power of those other propertyless men and women. And again, Marx used French words that he may have heard during his years in Paris to give names to those two opposing classes. The factory workers are called le prolétariat, the proletariat. The capitalists are called la bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie. It is a relatively simple two-class model rooted in the economic position of its members. One class receives wages, the other class lives off the surplus value that they extract from the working class. You may be surprised by the praise that Marx heaps upon the heads of the members of the bourgeoisie in the first pages of the Communist Manifesto. In early capitalism, Marx says, they were the ones to blow away old traditional institutions that hindered progress. They are adventurous, they take risks, they brought us modernity, they created the possibility of enormous wealth. But under conditions of high capitalism, this bourgeoisie class now makes its profits mainly by exploiting the members of the working class. If those proletarians do not accept the long working days or the low wages, they are told, and maybe in a very friendly way, well, maybe you should look out for a better job elsewhere. They are no slaves, they are no serfs, they can look out for a better job, they can negotiate about their remuneration. Well, Marx says that is all a big lie. In actual fact, the modern proletarian has less freedom than a slave in antiquity, and that is because there is never enough work. So in front of the gates of the factory we see this large group of unemployed and hungry people who are willing to do anything to get a job. Marx calls it the reserve army of workers. For every discontented worker that leaves the plant, there are 10 men or women or children who are willing to work for very long days and for very low wages. So the workers have no bargaining power. And that is the reason why they can be exploited, which means that the value that they create for the entrepreneurs is superior to the value of the wages that they receive. They have no alternative but to give this surplus value away with nothing in return.
Alright class, the first in line is class struggle. Do you know who is this? So this is Karl Marx, the one that has been mentioning a lot about class struggle. Indeed, he was the founding father of this theory. Okay, class struggle by Karl Marx. Based on his conflict theory on the idea that modern society has only two classes of people, the bourgeoisie and also the proletariat. The bourgeoisie are the owners of the means of production. They own the factories, businesses, and equipment needed to produce wealth. The proletariat are the workers, the low-class workers, yeah? According to Marx, the bourgeoisie in capitalist societies exploit workers. The owners pay them enough to afford food and a place to live. The workers, meanwhile, who do not realize they are being exploited, have a false consciousness or a mistaken sense that they are well off. They think they can count on their capitalist bosses to do what was best for them. So it's like janji palsu, yeah? Or they have a false imagination of their bosses. So there are 6 elements in Marx's view of class conflict. These elements are very important also. So you need to really understand about each element. The first one is classes are authority relationships based on property ownership. The second one, a class defines groupings of individuals with shared life situations, thus interest. Next, classes are naturally antagonistic by virtue of their interest. Imminent within modern society is the growth of two antagonistic classes and their struggle, which eventually absorbs all social relations. Number 5. Political organization and power is an instrumentality of class struggle, and reigning ideas are its reflection. Last but not least, the 6th element, structural change is a consequence of the class struggle. A simple understanding, class struggle is actually a theory related to the term class that had begun to be used to define a category of humankind. The class concept was popular since the first half of the 19th century. The ideas of Karl Marx has casted a long shadow over social science thinking and research on class. So what we can conclude is, Karl Marx saw class as a relationship between people with common relations to the means of the production. A bourgeoisie class of owners exploited a property-less proletariat through the latest need to sell its labor power. Next one, another theory in understanding what is class approach. Patron-client. So actually it's obvious, right? But still, let's take a look at it. So what is patron-client? According to James C. Scott, it refers to a special case of dyadic between two persons, ties involving a largely instrumental friendship in which an individual of higher socio-economic status, a patron, uses his own power, influence, and resources to provide protection or benefits, or both, for a person of lower status, client, who, for his part, reciprocates by offering general support of assistance, including personal services, to the patron. Okay, let me give you a simple example of a patron-client relationship. This is a simple one, yeah. Okay, I am a rich person who is looking for someone to take care of my education business. I happen to meet Celia, a very smart and talented girl that has the potential to assist in growing my education business to the next level. Since I need her service badly, I am willing to sponsor her education fees so that she can thrive and get a qualification and more knowledge in the field of education and business. In return of the education sponsorship, she has to provide me at least 5 to 10 years of service. Based on the storyline, it can be perceived as a win-win situation. That is related to two people from different class of society, which is me as the patron and Sally as the client. Everyone is clear of what patron-client is all about? Let's continue with the characteristics. So there are 6 characteristics of patron-client. The first one, close, intimate, and personal relationship based on mutual obligation or reciprocity. 2, hierarchical in nature. Number 3, achieve rather than ascribe. Number 4, long and short-term purposes. It can be either long or short, yeah. Number 5, shifting dynamic. And number 6, piggyback on capitalism. Next one, the last one in line is Neo-feudalism. Actually, Neo-feudalism is the same with the practice of feudalism. But Neo-feudalism is the new setting in a new era. But it's basically the same, yeah. So Neo-feudal is a term used to describe the purported contemporary re-emergence of a stratified class society. Neo-feudal is a reaffirmation of feudal elements in a new setting of the society. This is what I've been mentioning about just now. In Malaysia, the impact of modernization once again brought about significant change the life of the Malay community, which eventually shaped the political culture of neo-feudal participants. Next, how does class approach actually related to the political situation in Malaysia? So, application class approach in Malaysian politics. Sham, in his book Class and Communal Conflict in Malaysia, which is published in 1975, sees racial sentiment is growing because it benefits certain political leaders. According to him, political leaders often exploit and highlight racial issues for political and personal support. Sham, by then rejected the idea about consociational politics that we have been discussing early on in Malaysia, one of the main concepts in ethnic approach, because for him it only exists at the top level. Meanwhile, bottom level, the people have never shared the spirit of consociational as shared by political elites within the BN that across racial boundaries. Class approach sees society as a strata or layer. Okay, for the upper class, it is small in size but controls various sectors, especially economics and politics. Meanwhile, for the middle class, a simple class both in terms of income and social. In Malaysian context, this class exists but not yet influential even though it has recently shown a more effective development. Meanwhile, for the lower class, is the largest class comprising the commoners such as workers, farmers, lower level service workers, general workers, and so on. However, in Malaysian context, the lower classes are still racially divided. Due to strong racial sentiments, they are difficult to unite for a common purpose despite sharing the same basic interest. And why class consciousness is not exist in Malaysia? Or, in other words, why they aren't aware that they are being exploited? Political elites and party leaders use various tools to strengthen their power, laws and government machineries to ensure their position is not challenged. For example, there is Sedition Act, AUKU, ISA, X, yeah? So all of these things are used supposedly to ensure the security of the country is under control, but it is often misused by leaders for their self-interest. Okay, total control and manipulation in political process. Exists democracy and regular elections, but those are monopolized and controlled by the ruling elite to ensure victory in every election. An example, using government machineries like SPR, JKR, RTM, media, government agencies such as Felda and Jakwa during elections. The unfair and uneven playing fields in political competition in elections, and then the one related with money, media, machineries that always against the opposition and civil society. An example, during election, only government party may use mass media inside the TV, radio, newspaper to campaign, but not to the opposition. So as a result of class distortion through elite manipulation, race, religion, language and tradition, the elite exploit and manipulate racial sentiments in order to maintain and perpetuate the economic and political supremacy. For example, Ketuanan Melayu, Malay supremacy, Petualang bangsa, hidup Melayu, setia, pengkhianat negara. Ability of the elite to purposely create a vertical ties, false consciousness, through ethnic sentiment, one nation, setia, demi bangsa, budaya dan agama, nationalism, asas perjuangan, that managed to submerge class consciousness. It led the masses to be more sensitive to ethnic antagonism. That is why the lower classes, or the masses, are unable to take over the government, although theoretically the masses have voting power to choose the government or change it. But the reality is that power is not exercised because of leaders' hegemony, manipulation and indoctrination. Those hegemony, manipulation and indoctrination were created through false consciousness by the elite through ethnic sentiments. For some, different ethnic groups may be able to live together, but yet elite manipulation have weakened the relations between them and while maintaining their position as elite. But when racial conflict occurs, the masses will face the violence and misery. Instead, the different ethnic elites doesn't feel anything, not affected, and yet they are still closely connected with each other. So class, what is the conclusion? So that is all for our first half of chapters 2 topic for this week. We are going to touch on the second half of this topic, which is about cultural pluralism and politics of accommodation, and also the creation of plural society by next week. And as a conclusion for today's topic, there are two main approaches in understanding the politics based on Malaysian context. Ethnic approach is used as one of the approaches since Malaysian's political history is mostly related to a multiracial community or plural society that has been shaped long ago, started from the colonial period. Also, there are three main terms in understanding this approach. The terms or concepts include plural society, primordial sentiments, as well as consociational democracy. Meanwhile, for class approach, it has been applied in the context of Malaysian politics due to the condition of class hegemony, in which Shang believes that this approach is best to explain political condition in Malaysia, despite having the ethnic component seen as a major in influencing political situation in Malaysia. The three important theories related to class approach are the class struggle, Patron-client, and Neo-feudal. Alright class, let's end our session for today. All the best, take care, and stay safe, yeah?